So, good evening again, everyone, and welcome to Bible study. Last week we were looking at the book of First Timothy, chapter 2, and we were looking at verses 8 to 11, I think it was. And we were looking at the subject of um, whether women are allowed to allowed whether women should speak in the church. So I'm going to read I'm going to read the passage again. And what we said was we had some contributions, and there were still some thoughts that we had towards the end. So we decided that we will carry on this week just to make sure that we've gone through it, and any questions. And Pastor asked us a question towards the end as well for us all to think about. So let's we'll see where people are with that small exercise as well. But I'll read First Timothy chapter 2. I'll read verses 8 to 12, or actually I just read 8 to the end. It says, I desire therefore that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. In like manner also, that the women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with propriety and moderation, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly clothing, but which is proper for women professing godliness with good works. Let a woman learn in silence with all submission. And I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. Nevertheless, she will be saved in childbearing if they continue in faith, love, and holiness with self-control. So that was First Timothy 2, verses 8 to 15 I read. And the emphasis, or where we spent a lot of time talking last week, was on verse 11 and 12, or verses 11 and 12, that says, let a woman learn in silence with all submission, and I do not permit a woman to teach or to have authority over a man, but to be in silence. So as a very quick 30-second recap for those that were not here last week, there were lots of contributions. We really were blessed with the contributions that we had, but we started by looking at what verse 8, in verse 8 Paul was talking about the male man, when it was talking about man in that passage and not mankind. So it was quite clear that Paul was talking about men and women as we know it. Interestingly, in verse 8, it talks about the role of the man, for the man to lead by spiritual example. It talks about lifting up holy hands. Then we see in verse 9 that there is a pointing to the heart of man, or the heart of, and now this is saying the heart of all of us, and about our relationship with Christ. So in Paul's example about the women and the way that they adorned themselves, he was talking about really that there shouldn't be a setting out to be seen in that sense, and to let that beauty come from within, if you like, rather than the outer appearance. We also then touched on the fact that in the book of Timothy as well, we see that in Second Timothy, Paul obviously commends Lois and Eunice, who were godly women that had an influence on Timothy's life. So we spent some time talking about women from the Bible that we know were prophets, or had some sort of spiritual gift. We talked about Lydia, Priscilla, Philip's daughters. Philip had 4 daughters who prophesied according to the book of Acts. Proverbs 31 woman. We saw the role of the woman being discussed in Proverbs 31 as well, was given. And then for context as well, we looked at 1 Corinthians 14 and in verse 34 that it really talks about, the same thing about the women being quiet or being proper in worship. So, and then towards the end of this First Timothy 2 that we read, we see that Paul makes an argument, makes a reference back to the order of creation and the fall. So some of the things that we had discussed was that it would appear that from what Paul was saying, he was really bringing and trying to highlight the order, the head, God being the head or Christ being the head of the church, and how that flows down. And this restriction seems to be when it's about doctrine rather than teaching or preaching. But and then we also touched on a couple of things that people might typically say about, or that might be Paul's opinion, and times have changed. So I'm not going to go over all of that, but we just caution ourselves that we need to be careful about how we have these discussions, that it's the same way that people that don't know the word try to twist it to try to get us to think like them. But we must always recognize and respect that the Bible is the word of God at all times. So we had a contribution from poet Jessica that was really a blessing, and she raised the question, or she raised her thoughts and shared her thoughts as well, which was quite challenging really, because she let us know that she was, if I recall correctly, she was in her former role, she was ordained by her husband in the church, and then over time her husband's position also then changed with regards to or whether she could lead the church or not lead the church, in that sense. So that was, and we had quite a few other contributions as well, but I thought poet Jessica's one was quite a meaningful one, in that it got us thinking from real examples of how we can go through different variations of what we're talking about, and having somebody that's lived through it to then understand that perspective as well, that there is still a challenge, even for somebody that's gone through it, to be able to reconcile what Paul was saying here, and be fully confident that we understand what God is saying. But ultimately, we see that there is a thing about responsibility, and there is a thing about authority, and there is a spiritual authority that has been given, in a sense, by God, and we see that as the order that was being set. So having kind of gone through all of that, and all of that being said last week, we said that we were still going to give ourselves a little bit more time for people that have had the chance to think about this again, or any other thoughts on the matter, or questions or things that came up since you've had time to hear, to think, to digest. Whilst at the same time, Pastor then left us with the question in verse 12, because verse 12 in the King James says, "But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." So what does the word what does the word usurp mean? So look at the pretext, the post-text, as we always do, the context, which I think we read that passage in its context in a couple of translations last week. But that really should help us with understanding what Paul was trying to say about, or maybe the core of the argument for that Paul was trying to give us about this usurping authority. So I'll leave that question there, and any other thoughts that we still have, or questions that we have hanging over from last week, and I'll leave the floor open for us to go ahead and contribute, please. Or anything that wasn't clear that you want to ask again, let's do that, please. And if you were not here and you You wanted to ask a question, or as long as you're not taking us back. No, it's okay to ask, and we'll try and address it from the answers that we had last week. So 1 Timothy 2 is where we're still at where we were last week, for those that might just be joining, and we've just summarized the things that we discussed, or the key areas that we discussed, and we were looking at this thing about spiritual authority and order, and that was being set out. So let's
Can the women answer?
yes, they may.
Even me, will I not be usurping your authority?
What does usurp mean, my dear?
English is not my first language. Sorry.
Just tell me in Yoruba.
Ouch.
Did we hear your voice last week? We have now. Okay, so you were going to say something, or you were just going to pull my
No,
leg?
I wasn't. I was just giving a comedy break.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to assume that there are no questions, and everything we discussed last week was clear, and we know where we stand, right? Pardon?
No, we didn't deal with the issue of usurping authority.
Yeah.
The man's authority.
So did it? Yes, thank you for that reminder as well. Do we? So what is the word usurp? Usurp. Not quite sure how to pronounce. I'm joking. What does that word mean? So we may want to look at it in English, or for the more studious ones, if you want to. I'm not sure the Greek is any easier to pronounce than usurp, to be honest, but if you want to try the Greek, then go ahead as well. So,
well, I think without looking at the dictionary, I would say to usurp is to take the place of, is to occupy or take the place of somebody who is in authority over you.
Yep. That's a good definition, bro. Denny. Thank you. And without looking at the dictionary, you've scored very highly, I would say.
All right.
I think if we I'm going to start speaking, and then if anyone wants to say something, then please do. But from what I've read and from what I've seen, to usurp is pretty much what Brad Dele has said. But in some dictionary definitions, you would see that it talks about taking that position illegally or by force. And synonyms might be supplant, unseat, depose, those kind of things. It means that you've basically just given someone the elbow. Sorry,
what did Brother Dili say? We didn't quite catch that. I didn't quite.
Okay, let me repeat.
I didn't quite.
Please repeat, brother.
Yeah, I repeat. Yeah, I said to usurp, I think means when somebody takes the place or occupies the place of somebody who is in authority over them. So you know the person is an authority over you, but you nevertheless occupy the place. or you just take the place of that person.
Like a coup d'etat.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Possibly. Yes.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. So
It's a coup d'etat.
the coups are usually people usurping
Who usurp
authority.
authority.
They plan and they come like a thief in the night, drive their tanks, and suddenly there's a change in authority. So so I think that's the sense of the word is this taking possession of, but generally you would see that it's by force or illegally, which is quite interesting when you now, if you substitute that word back into what Paul is saying, and to paraphrase, saying that, but I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to take over illegally over the man.
I'm just going to contribute and say, sometimes it might not be illegally it might not be illegal in the world, because it's the same word that we have gazump in the housing industry, in the mortgage industry. Somebody brings a bid and somebody places an higher bid over what you've bidded, and that word is also gazump. But in the way you're looking at it,
But that's a different word from usurp. Gazump is a completely different concept.
Well,
you see, with gazump, you what you do, it may be immoral without being illegal.
Illegal, but it's unethical.
But usurp is a different thing. It's a completely different thing. So we can't. They are two different words. They mean two different things.
Okay, Pastor.
I think
the concepts are different.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Good evening. I think with the issue of usurping, I don't think that would necessarily be contentious. I'm sorry, I've only just come on. Good evening.
Good evening.
I don't think that would be contentious, because I'm sure most Christian women in particular would know that it would be wrong to usurp authority. I think the issue that was contentious was, are women allowed to preach? Are women allowed to teach according to the word of God?
They're actually linked. The two things are linked. They're not separate. They're not separate at all. So that's why I asked the question, and I wanted us to think about it. So let's go to this. Let's go to the scriptures. Let's go and look at what the Bible dictionaries say about the word usurp.
Okay, Pastor.
It's the Greek word authenteo. Authenteo, from where we get the word authentic, I think. Now, authenteo means, Strong's says, from a compound of G3846, hentes, obsolete, a worker. So it's a compound of a word that means a worker, and then the meaning. So that's where it's the background. The meaning is to act of oneself. That is figuratively dominate, usurp authority over. Now let me go to Thayer. So that's Strong's definition. Thayer's definition is more is much more elaborate and goes into more detail. So and please listen, because it will help us to advance the argument a little bit better. Number one who with his own hands kills another or himself. That's number one. One who with his own hands kills another or himself. Number two, one who acts on his own authority, autocratic. Number three, an absolute master. Number 4, to govern, exercise dominion over one. Okay. So those are the.
I've got another one, Pastor. The helps word study.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
Yeah. It's the it says it's the compound of 2 words as well. The autos, which is self, and entea, which is arms, enters, which is arms, armor. So self armor. And then it also talks about it mentions what you just acting as an autocrat, literally self-appointed. Then in bracket, it puts acting without submission in bracket.
That's it. Awesome. Awesome. All right. So putting it all together, let's see the sense in what Paul. Now, please remember what Tunji said last week. Very important, that Paul could not have been saying women could not talk in church at all, because we see in other places where he actually talks about women talking in church, where he talks about the manifestation of the Spirit is given to everyone to profit. I didn't say the manifestation of the Spirit is given to men to profit the church. It says given to everyone, unless women are not ones, you know. So when you find the balance of the word, you do realize that Paul is actually not saying a woman cannot prophesy, preach, teach at all. That's not what he's saying, because if that is what he is saying here, then he contradicts it when he gets to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, chapter 14, when he talks about in church, somebody prophesies and somebody will interpret in the church, and somebody, when one person is prophesying, let somebody else. You see, if it was a universal principle that he was trying to, he would say, when the man is prophesying, another man will interpret, but so we can see from scriptures that that's not what Paul is saying. He's not saying women cannot talk, because we see that women can talk. What he is saying, that's why I wanted, when Poet just talked about that, there are 2 things about teaching and about authority. The 2 of them are linked, they're connected. He's talking about the fact that a woman cannot teach without authority. She can't just get up and teach. She can't teach without authority. She can't grab that authority by herself. She can't usurp it. She can't self-appoint. Okay, so that's the operative thing there, that she has to be in submission, and then he begins to point out who she's in submission to, and primarily she's in submission to her husband, and all that, and that in the church. Now, the interesting thing is that the man can also not usurp authority. From the teachings, from Paul's teachings and John's and John the Baptist and all that, it says nobody, and Jesus himself said, nobody takes that authority unto himself. He is given the authority. So when the man preaches or teaches, he doesn't take the authority unto himself. He doesn't usurp it. It is a man does not have anything that he did not receive. It is given him. So he's operating under authority. And we remember the centurion saying, I'm a man under authority. I say to one, go. It is only because he's under authority that he can exercise authority. So he doesn't usurp authority. He doesn't grab it. He doesn't take it by force. He's not an absolute master. He's not one who acts on his own authority. He's not autocratic. He's not one who with his own hands kills another or himself. So this is very interesting. What that word means is that when you seize authority, you are killing yourself and other people. That's what that first definition of from Thea, what it points to, and then to govern or exercise dominion over one without any authority. That's usurping authority. So I think the issue is that the woman is not to assume authority on her own in her own cognizance. She has to, authority has to be delegated to her. But interestingly, like I said, even the man cannot assume authority by himself. It has to be delegated to him. So as we follow the teachings of Paul, we now begin to see that he establishes the order in Corinthians, where he talks about the head of every woman is the man, the head of every man is Christ, the head of Christ is God, and God is Lord, or is a God over everything. So Christ himself did not usurp authority. He didn't just come and he always made it very clear, I don't come of myself, of my own. I'm not doing this of myself. I didn't take this authority by myself. Yes, I didn't usurp it. I'm not autocratic. Yes, and this authority was given to me, even though I'm in the form of God. I didn't think equality with God was something that I needed to grapple or grasp. So I surrendered, submitted myself, even to the obedience of death. So he didn't usurp authority. So when women get very fussy about, oh, blah, 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 you can't do that. No. The man himself, before he can exercise any authority over his wife, he has to be under authority. That's why by the time we get to Paul teaching on husbands, love your submitting yourselves one to another in the fear of God. Now, notice that there's that it begins with mutual. I've taught this several times, and it's so important. This teaching on marriage, for example, begins with mutual submission. So the man submits to the woman submits to the man. Then he starts off by saying, he says, wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as the church submits to Christ, and as the church submits to Christ in all things. So let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. And as the woman is sitting there scratching her head and saying, what kind of wahala is this? What kind of oppression is this? What kind of terrible lot have I got in life? Then he turns to the man and says, husbands, love your wives as Christ also loved the church. I didn't even ask the woman to die. I asked her to just submit. But men, I'm asking you to die. Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it by the washing of water, by the word, that he might present himself without spot, wrinkle, or blood. He said, no man ever yet hates himself, but nourishes and cherishes his own body. So as a man loves his own body, that's how he's to love his wife. Because, and to lay down his life for her. So you can see that this issue of authority is so important to God that he has put boundaries around it to protect everybody concerned. And the final picture that he gives is that this is how the authority structure works. This is how it works. The children are subject to their parents. The wife is subject to her husband. The husband is subject to Christ. Christ is subject to God, and God is Lord over all. So I think that the bottom line that from my own understanding is that he's saying, now, why does he need to why does he need to say that? Why would he need to say, don't teach, women should not teach and they shouldn't usurp authority? He explains it. He tells us. He says, because the woman was in transgression. You see, there was an order. And the order was violated. When God created, he created the man first, and then he created the woman. Okay, And so that was where the first order came from. So the order was simply based on order of creation. So who was created first? So the man was created. Now there has to be a head. All that joint headship doesn't. There's nothing like that. There's any creature that has two heads is a monster. It's not a normal creature. So all that stuff about we're joint heads, it doesn't work. You can't go to an office and you see that we're joint heads. You see, even where they are partners, where people are partners, there's a senior partner, there's a speaking partner, and there's there's nothing like joint heads. It doesn't exist. Sorry. So one person yes, one person has to take responsibility. Somebody has to be the answerable, the spokesperson, the person where the buck stops. So so that is so important. Now, based on creation, God said the headship is with the man because he was created first. Now that's it. Now, and it wasn't an oppressive headship. It was just because somebody has to be in front and somebody has to speak. Like if we get into the car, we can't both drive the car. We just can't both. We can't say, well, she can drive, I can drive. So let's both drive it. Let's put two steerings and two brakes and two. No. It doesn't work like that. And even where the driving instructor has a mirror, this thing, he can't use it at the same time that the learner is using it. He only uses it when there's danger and he overrides. So please, let's get that. But when the woman violated that authority structure by disobedience and then caused her husband to violate it as well. So remember, the whole, let's bear in mind what the authority structure is. It is God, Christ, man, woman. That's the authority structure that Paul helps us to understand. So when this woman violated the authority structure in the Garden of Eden, and they now fell, both man and by her disobedience, she now caused this man to violate the authority of Christ over him as well. So when judgment came, God now reestablished the principle of the man is head of the woman. He established it again. He said, and this time, because of the fall and the consequences of it, we're reestablishing the fact that the woman has to submit to this man's leadership. It is now compulsory, where it was in the beginning. It was a very sweet flow. It was very sweet fellowship. It was grace. It wasn't the law. But after the fall, it was now an instruction that had to be followed. So when he's pointing it out, he's saying, God has reestablished that structure based on first, that the man was created before the woman, and then secondly, that the woman was the transgressor, that she was the one who initiated the transgression. So that's why she's secondary. But with grace now, he's saying she comes up back to the place of exercising full authority, full grace, but under the under submission to her husband. And her husband, who had fallen, comes back to that place of exercising full authority, but under submission and authority to Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ, who didn't fall, but took our fall, comes back to that place of authority under the Father. So I hope that puts it into some kind of perspective.
Yes, it does.
It is, yes.
Protective, I think, as well. Preserving and protecting
the structure.
It protects the woman.
Yeah.
Protects the man.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So God having being under that authority
structure,
yes, protects us from. So it's like,
so I the woman is guaranteed that the man will not oppress her because he's under Christ. The man is guaranteed that Christ will not oppress him because, of course, he is Christ, you know. And the woman, it can be assured that your husband, since he's a man under authority, he will do what he has to do. He will not oppress you when you are submitted to his authority. And the children can be guaranteed that they will not be oppressed because their parents are submitted to Christ. Mm-hmm. So you can see workers are guaranteed that their employers will not oppress them because they are submitted to a higher authority. So that's how the whole structure is protective. Yes, it is protective. I hope that has helped to put it into some kind of perspective. Or has it thrown more questions?
So I think it helps in a sense. However, I still have a few and I hear your explanation, which is very good. But when we say the only bit I'm struggling with, I must confess, is this meaning about the woman not teaching and usurping authority, being to say she shouldn't take authority over by herself, and then we said also that the man is in the same position. That kind of, for me, it just kind of so I'm wondering, what is the point of Paul saying this? Why would he say that? Because that if that is what he's saying, and I'm not saying that's not what he's saying, but I'm saying if that's what he's saying, that's just nullified. This statement is almost redundant.
Okay, I'll tell you why. Paul said it. Let me tell you why he said it. He said it from my own thought. My thoughts. It might not be the answer. It might just, but it's a thought. Now, yes, and people can have different opinions on it. Now, I think he explains it that. Have you noticed that men don't have as much of a problem submitting to authority as women do?
Did you say that?
Yes. Okay. I'll tell you why I'm saying that. Because you will notice that I've rarely seen where there's an instruction, a direct instruction to men that submit. Men, you have to submit. Men have to submit when they go to work. You know, men have to work. And when they go to work, they have to submit. You cannot work without submitting to authority. You can't. Because you're in working, you are under authority. You are submitting to something. There's a goal and there's somebody over you and there's a hierarchy and structure. And men have to live with that. They are wired to live with that. So men very seldom have that problem of authority. Women, on the other hand, tend to are more relationship. Their role was not primarily to work, was primarily to help the man. So they are more relationship. So the issue for women is that issue of submission, and especially since the fall, where it was the woman that initiated the fall. So that's why Paul had to call it up to say, this is where your propensity is to rebel. There's a propensity in your nature to rebel. There's a propensity in a man's nature. He finds it difficult to love. He can submit, but he finds it very difficult to love. So you find that when Paul now begins to teach, he addresses the area of weaknesses for both sexes. The men find it difficult to love. The women find it difficult to submit. So I believe that this is my thought, because when he now teaches in chapter 5 of Ephesians, he begins to say, this is what husbands you love, wives you submit. Nevertheless, I'm talking about Christ and the church and all that. So I think that the reason he points it out, he calls it out, is because it's an area where women tend to, where they could, if they're not under the tutelage of the Holy Spirit, they could go astray. And I think the best picture of that is Jezebel and Ahab. Yes. But that's my thought. That's my thought. So I'm open to other views and other if whatever. So let's yeah.
Pasenja, I don't know if you're done with your question, but so how does the authority thing work now? So is it that the husband will allow his wife preach, or is it that the head of the church, who is a man, will allow the women preach? How about single women?
Yeah.
How
does
it work?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Jennifer, go on.
That's all.
Yeah. So that was going to be my second aspect, because in the explanation, I think I get the explanation between the man and the woman as it pertains to their home, so husband and wife. But in this context, I think Paul was talking about the church, right? So, the question I was going to ask was exactly what Jennifer just asked. So, how does this play out? Because if the woman is submitted to the husband has authority over her. Are we saying that if the husband gives her authority to teach in church, she can then get up? So, what if her husband is not the pastor? Yeah.
No. I think again, he did say that if they would learn anything, they should ask their husbands and everything. So now that's where the whole issue of the culture of the era comes in and stuff like. But I think there will be two things at play there. He's using it to address the issue of women being subject to their own husbands, as he later teaches in Ephesians 5. But then also it points to the bigger picture of how the church would run. That now the fact that somebody doesn't have a husband, she's still submitted to, and it says she's submitted to her father. She's under her father's authority until she gets married. Paul is very clear about that, and I think society, the tradition, even the Bible teaches that until she marries, she's under her father's authority. So there's no, I don't think there's a problem with authority structures or who we're in the church, But again, the question is, yes, we now come to the question: who now permits people to talk? The person who has the authority. So if the person who has the authority in church, so let's say where he is, Paul is now empowering Timothy to be the bishop of Ephesus and saying, go. Now, it means that Timothy is the one who has the authority to determine who can speak and who cannot speak. He's the one who gives that authority. He's the one who will now bequeath the authority, because the authority is vested in him. So Paul and the eldership have laid hands on him and made him the overseer. So I think there will always, the authority structure still stands, and it is that authority structure that determines who's going to preach and who's not going to preach. So if the authority structure says, Sister so-and-so can preach, Sister so-and-so can teach, I think that person can teach because they have not usurped authority. The authority has been delegated to them, and they are operating under that authority. Okay. So that's my thought.
Yeah, I get that. But if we then look at this, though, by the way, I just to mention, for everyone also to join, one of the things we have to understand, this for me, this is a secondary issue. So it's not. So the fact that we may have different opinions doesn't mean that we're not agreed. By the way, so but Pastor, I was going to say, so in this case, then, because since we're talking about the letter of Paul to Timothy, as it concerns the pastor in the Ephesus church, right? So he's saying here, I suffer not a woman to teach, yet speaking to Timothy, and you usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. So is it safe to assume that Timothy would not have allowed the woman to teach or usurp authority over the man?
No, I think my thought is that she will not of her own take the authority, but if the authority is given to her, if the opportunity is given to her, because like we said, so let's, well, okay, that the teaching, I guess teaching is different from prophesying and things like that, but
Which is why I said that I don't think I was saying that the woman should be silent in that way, because
in that way, yes,
prophesying and doing all stuff. But
my thought is that Timothy is given the authority to empower her to speak. She cannot speak on her own. Don't teach. She can't open her mouth and just teach or just decide that she knows something, or she wants to teach, or she wants to. But if she's given if she's given the authority by the person upon whom that authority is vested, then that's my thought. But I may be wrong. I may be wrong. I don't know. Those are some of the areas that are not too clear. He says categorically, I suffer not to teach. But then what makes it a little bit difficult is the fact that, and to usurp authority. Because if there was no question of authority, if it wasn't a question of authority, if it was just a question of teaching alone, he would have said, she's not allowed to teach, full stop. But why does he tie it to the issue of authority? You know? So I think it's because there was a problem with the authority structure. Women were violating that authority structure. And also, please bear in mind that this was common, that the priestesses of those temples they were dominant figures in Paul's days, and they prophesied, they did all kinds of the false gods, Diana and all those things. So they usurped authority. So that could be why that teaching was also tied to the issue of authority, because women were ransacking the thing, just, you know, and you know that the temple prostitutes, the priestesses and prophetesses they were all women, all that ran those cults and all those religious groups at that time. They were run predominantly by women. So that's where the usurping of authority, that's why this authority structure thing was so important. Again, that's part of the background.
Pastor, how about the issue of the bishop should be the man of one wife? Mm-hmm. That one, women that
that one too. I think I asked that about 3 weeks ago. So was that. Yes, the bishop should be the husband of one wife. He didn't say or she should be the wife of one husband. So yeah.
So can women be pastors, or they should just come and teach once in a while when their husband says okay, when the church leader says okay?
If they well, again, you see, I think it's whether we can see or agree with the fact that this usurping authority means that authority can be given to you to do certain things. If it means that, then women can be anything. But if it means only that they can talk and not teach and not do anything else, then it means that they cannot be pastors, they cannot be deacons, they cannot be anything else. But that is again subject to whether that statement is categorical, in the sense that don't teach, don't do anything, or don't usurp the authority to do those things.
Mm-hmm. So Pastor, I was going to ask. I know of a pastor and his late wife. It was the late wife that God called to plant a church, and she planted the church. But along the way, she passed away. And then the husband now took over the church. What do you say about that, Pastor?
I don't
Was
say
Pastor there? The pastor know who called
what
who?
I'm trying to say is that that means if like Brother Tunji say, is a secondary thing, but it's good to have knowledge. But that means there's a structure, and it has to be God, Jesus, and then the husband, and then the wife. But in this case, the wife says she's been called by God to plant a church, and she did plant the church. She did. The church was flourishing in Tottenham, but then she passed away, and then the husband now took over. So I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are.
I don't know. I quite frankly, I don't know.
Yesterday we go reach heaven first, so before we go get the answer.
Unless she was ordained by church or an overseer.
You see,
like in redeemed where they ordained.
Yeah. Well, no, you see, I think that's where the issue is. The problem that some people are having is that the church does not even have the right to ordain people, women, into those ministries. That's what some people have a problem with, that this scripture seems to suggest that they cannot be pastors, they cannot be deacons, they cannot at all. Whereas there's another school of thought, which is where I seem to fall into, that if they are granted that authority by the proper authority figure, or whoever holds the authority, then they can do it. So it's now which school of thought you fall into will determine what the answer. Yes,
let each person be fully persuaded. You want to believe this, you want the other one.
And the beautiful thing about this is that, like Tunji just said, it is secondary. What is critical is that Jesus Christ is Lord. Yeah, that is the critical thing. But yeah, I think you have to prayerfully consider what your stand is. Do you think and in whatever you believe, again, you have to be very careful that you don't come across judging your brother or your sister or causing them offense because you believe one way or the other. So it is again so important that whichever side of the fence we choose to stand on, we must let love be the most important. Thank you, Mommy. Arbiter. Nice word.
Pastor, one more question. What if it was Adam that ate the apple first and gave
it? Wasn't
Eve?
An apple.
Okay, pomegranate.
Now, Popo.
Where will we be? Where will we be now? We'll be saying the man cannot talk in the church.
In the church, yes. I would imagine. I probably would imagine that there would have been some consequences. But yeah, there definitely would have been consequences if it was the man that ate it first, because there's always consequences. Always consequences. So yeah, you are right that if it had been the other way around, we don't know how it would have played out, but there would have certainly been consequences. We would be saying something different now. We wouldn't be saying it the way we're saying it.
The woman gives him authority.
Must say that for me, as Pastor, I gravitate towards the opposite end of Pastor. I kind of gravitate towards the fact that a woman cannot be a pastor. That's where mostly my leaning is. That doesn't mean that I don't acknowledge women pastors or anything, but that's where my leaning is. However, I also believe that a woman can teach. I just have reservations when it comes to them pastoring, because it is clear that, well, at least to me, it's clear that Paul mentions it a few times about the bishops and the elders and the being to Timothy.
So the fivefold. Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. So they can, in the fivefold, can they be apostles? Can they be prophets? They can be pastors? Can they be They can be teachers. Can they be evangelists in the fivefold? So when we look at those the fivefold, which can they be?
So I think those offices exist today across the body generally. I personally, again, this is my own thinking. I don't believe that anyone can be an apostle today in this day, because it seems like the scripture is clear on who an apostle is. But that's another story for another day. But I believe the function of the apostles is spread across the body. But in the sense that the Bible talks about an apostle, I don't know that there's an apostle in the world today. So people call themselves apostles, but it is clear from scriptures that. So if we look at when the apostles were going to replace Judas, for instance, they gave specific criteria about who an apostle can be. When Paul was speaking in 1 Corinthians 15.
No, no, I think we'll have to revisit this. We have to revisit this because of time. They were talking about a specific office. They were talking about a specific office.
Okay.
They were not talking about the office of the apostle, because the Bible says he gave some to be apostles, he gave some to be prophets, he gave some. He didn't say it was there were only 12. He gave them to be apostles.
Like I said, when Paul also mentioned apostles in 1 Corinthians 15, and he seemed to be talking about several of them, maybe not much about close to about 500. But there's one thing he said that was clear, that they all saw Jesus, that they witnessed him.
No. He's talking about that particular group, but the apostolic calling that he subsequently talks about hasn't got to do anything with those initial group of people.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Okay.
Yes, it doesn't at all.
We can talk about that later. What I'm saying is, for me, the perspective I hold is the function of the apostles, prophets, teachers, pastors, evangelists exist today, but are spread across the body. In terms of the office of those particular office, especially the apostle one, I don't think that personally, based on my conviction on scriptures, I don't think anybody can even call themselves that, because those were meant to be build the church, keep the canon of scriptures, and I don't think anybody's writing scriptures today. So in that sense, I don't think apostles exist. However, the functions in terms of maybe planting churches, maybe working of miracles, prophesying, teaching, pastoring, and all that, those giftings or gifts are spread across the body. So for men and women, and I believe that women can teach. Where I hold the difference is that when a woman is teaching or laying down authority or doctrinal truths, I think it seems to be clear from scripture that they shouldn't be doing that. And I think that's what, for me, I think that's...
No, I'm not sure that it's clear. I'm not sure.
This is my
I know.
So I think...
Yes, I know. I get that.
I think what 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12 is talking about, based on my understanding, is that they shouldn't do that. And then I don't... it seems to be clear that the roles of the pastors and teachers and pastors and prophets and stuff like that in the church, in church leadership, is reserved for the men. That's what I believe.
I cannot agree with that. So we have to stop.
Come back next week. Brother Tunji, I land in my resignation.
Move our name from the prayer call.
I'm going. I'm going.
But it is based on your conviction.
Yes, sir.
Remove Jodette from the prayer.
Me, I know what to do before. I have an excuse now. But that's what you say I can't. So it's over.
Me too, brother. Me too.
You can preach, you can teach, you can...
No, I don't want to.
We don't want to. We don't want to.
You have
Sorry.
Tunji, by the time you finish, it will be only you and me that it will only be two of us that are there.
It will only be you and Pastor.
And we'll put but
we don't want to preach anymore. In fact, we will hold placard.
Yes, so we join the protest. We are joining the protest.
Oh dear.
The captain one.
But on the more serious note, sorry, I know we are out of time. When Pastor started defining this usurping, it just really brought my attention to the fact that the order of things was God, Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah.
So that means the man has to really be he has to take his place. Yes. So it just really brought my attention that this thing is serious, so that the men have been given an office here. They need to take it.
And have you noticed that the problem all along has always been men will not rise up to take their place. Women are usurping their place.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's it. So
yeah.
So again, once it falls into proper perspective, yes, the women.
So, Pastor, is it women usurping if the men are not taking their place? I'm trying to understand that bit.
No, it will still be usurping. You see, whether if let's say this thing is reserved for A, and A refuses to do it, and B that is not reserved for comes and takes it, it's still usurping. The fact that nature abhors a vacuum doesn't mean that it's not usurping, because it's for A, and until A takes it, and only it's only when A is there that it is legitimate. If B comes and takes it, it's usurping.